I had a dream about the woman that I love, not a cloud. In the blue sky up above there was an ache. Anytime we were apart, just like a movie. Well, she up and stole my heart, it was a good day. It was a good day. Yeah, it was good. It was a damn good day. Well, so here I am again trying to figure out how to tell this story. Rockin' Ride 3. Or as I like to call it, Big People Bandcamp. It's been a while. I didn't go on Rockin' Ride 2. Damn COVID pandemic sort of got in the way. So I guess it makes this sequel nearly 2 years in the making. And what a strange 2 years it's been. I mean, just think of it. We've all weathered over 20 months of the COVID-19 pandemic. Worldwide, more than 4 million people have died. We watched in disbelief the video of George Floyd's murder. We endured the 2020 presidential election and subsequent conspiracy theories and court rulings and insurrection. And we've been stunned by images of young children walking hundreds, thousands of miles alone in the hopes of a better life. It has not been an easy time in the world. Even in our little band of vagabond musicians and significant others, a lot has happened. Some of it good, some of it difficult. Some folks have drifted away, some new people have joined in, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. By the way, does anybody know where Kevin is? You might wonder what gives me the right to narrate this epic drama. The answer's the same as it was last time. I'm the author and I'm the editor, so it falls on me. And besides, nobody else wanted to do it anyway. So I'm going to start here. In the mid-1990s, during the siege of Sarajevo, Vedran Smalovic, a cellist, would take to the streets and play music accompanied by the sounds of bombs and exploding gunfire. Why? To remind people that there's beauty in the world. There's hope. For me, and I suppose some others, Rockin' Ride is a little bit like that. The first one was born out of the untimely passing of Kent's wife, Lori. It was a way for all of us to be together, support one another. Some rode motorcycles, and coincidentally we played music and had a good time. And while I really can't say much about RR2 since I wasn't there, I know that when we first started talking about Rockin' Ride 3, we were all still a little bit rattled by COVID. It was a time when not too much was certain. Even now, at this very moment, there are hot spots springing up around the country that make us all wonder, what the hell is going to happen? Well, even though there were no cellists among us, there were some damn good guitar players and singers and people we love. And so that's where we should start, with the beauty, the hope, the people of Bandcamp 2021. Was a damn good day. On the morning of September 13th, 2021, although the ultimate count was 27, 17 intrepid souls gathered at Kathy Latham's house at 9 o'clock in the morning for the official beginning of Rockin' Ride 3. The sky was overcast, it was unseasonably cool, and it looked like rain was heading our way, perhaps a portent of things to come. All but one of the motorcyclists among us decided that discretion was the better part of valor and parked their Harleys in Kathy's garage. So much for the ride component of the name. This served to solidify the moniker Bandcamp for big people. By the time I arrived, Randy was already on his second or third shot of tequila, and it looked like things were off to a roaring start. Now, John Sheltoff seemed just a little bit uneasy about the whole thing, but we're all used to that, so nobody paid him much attention. Mike was completely immersed in character, black leather vest, bandana, and a faux cigarette. Wow. There was a lot of nervous energy and joking around, but nobody seemed anxious to commence, and I began to wonder if the show was ever going to hit the proverbial road. Trying to get 17 musicians and friends all moving the same direction at the same time is a daunting task. Finally, Mike and Kelly got us organized for a group picture to commemorate the occasion. And by the way, it is handy to have Mike and his built-in selfie stick around. As soon as the pictures were taken, Randy stood up and said, "Well, let's go." And I guess people took that as a hint that it was time to leave. Kathy had some business to attend to that day, so she and I were going to meet up with the gang later that evening. I hung around in the street long enough to film everyone pulling out, and I confess I felt a little bit like the guy left behind at the Rapture. There went all our friends heading north to Nirvana, and I was stuck here on Earth in Illinois. I was contemplating this when a garbage truck pulled up behind me and honked, and the guy hollered at me to get out of the road, so I did. Now, rumor has it that the drive north was rainy and rather uneventful, with just one stop built in for lunch and libations. Apparently not much happened at the sports bar because nobody could tell me any stories about it, so I'll skip to later that night. Most everybody had brought along food to share, so there was a communal meal featuring a couple kinds of chili, sandwiches, and various snacks and desserts. Somebody built a campfire, and it wasn't long till guitars came out and a song circle ensued.
Doesn't mean that much to me, to mean that much to you.
If you look close, you might notice that everybody seemed to be wearing an orange wristband. I worried that maybe this was a way for the state of Wisconsin to keep track of us all. Or maybe it was some kind of over-the-hill hippie fashion statement. Whatever it was, Kathy and I felt a little left out because we didn't have one. Turns out the wristbands were issued by the resort, and nobody knows why. Kathy and I arrived at the edge of the Dells Resort around 10 o'clock that night, and I was a little worried we wouldn't be able to find the Big People Bandcamp gang. But as soon as we pulled in, we saw the campfire, and Kelly's white pants were glowing in the dark. Can you believe it? White pants after Labor Day? We could hear Wally's guitar pounding out some Elvis song, so I figured we were in the right place. We found a place to park and started to unload our stuff into Cabin A. Randy showed up to help us, and he snatched my guitar and took it over to Cabin F, where Phil and Mike had a PA set up and were jamming away.
Queen lived just outside.
This was a clue to me that this trip would be a little bit different than the first Rockin' Ride. There were only 10 or 12 of us on Rockin' Ride 1, so we pretty much did everything together. That's hard to do with 30 people, so I suppose it was natural for smaller groups to form. Once Kathy and I got our stuff stowed away, we headed to Cabin F and joined in the jam. Although I kept wondering about what was happening down at the campfire. Sometime around 11:30, way past my normal bedtime, Randy reminded us that we were supposed to be quiet by midnight. I took that as permission to hit the sack, and so ended the first night of Bandcamp. Before I go any further, let me introduce you to the stars of this show. In no particular order, there were Deb and Randy, Kathy, Amanda Lou, Kevin and Jay, Mike and Kelly, Roger and Trudy, Ray and Nancy, Phil and Layla, Tony, Rob, John, Marshall, Kent, Michelle, Glenn, and John, Jerry, Wally, Kathleen, Johnny Uke, and Priscilla, who, by the way, was John's wife and not his cousin, and Kathy and me. As you can see, John was a very popular name. Next morning, Kathy and I were the first to wake up in our cabin, so we went out to the porch and did yoga in the sun. It was a tad cool but beautiful morning. By the time we finished, the other Cabin A inhabitants were up and about, and so I made coffee and Kathy cut up some fruit, and we gathered around the table for breakfast. On a whim, I'd bought Frosted Flakes for the first time in 40 years or so, and they were great. Deb and Randy decided they were going into town to get a more substantial breakfast. Amanda went outside to inhale some carcinogens, and the rest of us settled into the morning routine. I took my guitar and headed down to the smoldering campfire to see who was up and about. For a while it was just me. Then Kent showed up and we traded songs for a bit. Gradually people stumbled out of their cabins. Some settled into conversation around the fire. Some headed to Cabin F jam site. Some went to the communal showers, and others just sort of wandered around in a sleepy daze. It reminded me of the iron filings and magnetic field demonstration from middle school science class. Some attractions, some repulsions, depending on where the magnets were placed. All things considered, it was a low-key day, but I could sense a subtle building up of energy and excitement about the impending first night of performances. There was a fair amount of discussion among us about who should go first and who would go last, and the order of everyone else in between. Maybe we should draw straws. Maybe Phil should just assign the order. I floated the notion of selling time slots, but that got vetoed as unduly capitalist opportunism. In the end, it was decided to just put up a sign-up sheet and let the chips fall where they may. Tony Scaroni drew the short straw and ended up going last. As Kurt Vonnegut said, so it goes. That brings us to the Brathaus Grill, the venue for our first gig. Kathy and I were the first to arrive around 6:30, but before long everybody else showed up. We weren't supposed to start playing until 9 o'clock, so we all ordered dinner and drinks, and needless to say, the Brathaus folks were pleased. It isn't every Tuesday night in the off-season that 27 people walk in together and start throwing money around. I'm not sure how or why Mike had garnered the nickname Tonto. There's nothing even remotely Native American about Mike Hawksworth, but he is a great sidekick.
Our Lone Ranger goes up, Tonto, God, don't you love sleeping here and the stars at night and everything? And he says, you fucking idiot white boy, they stole a tent.
Anyway, he and Randy started off the show.
And the good life you promised ain't what you live today. But don't you never complain, Bad times or bad things.
They were followed by Ray, who was as calm and cool as I've ever seen him. One of the new kids on the block, Rob, went next.
He said, when you leave, your name was not Jack Brown, and you're a dirty half shot your room.
Followed by Marshall. Then came Acme Pest Control and Explosives. God only knows where that name came from. Next up were Moon and the Man and the Others. On a side note, we're trying to come up with a better name, but to date no one has made any suggestions that merit adoption. Randy floated the idea of Bruce's Bodyguards. Mike's thrown out a number of derisory possibilities, and I'm sort of partial to the Ampersand Band. But the others look at me funny whenever I say that.
This is me walking out the door. I don't live here anymore.
Anyway, we were followed by a killer set from Phil's Zone. Then, much to our collective surprise, somebody found Kevin, and Where's Kevin took the stage.
Just like children sleeping, we can dream this night away. But there's a full moon rising. Let's go dancing in.
Then came Roger, who was joined by Kathleen on a nice rendition of Lucky Man. Some said Roger was the lucky man because Kathleen played with him. A new variation of the Lewis Band, including John Steinman and Kathleen, Michelle, and Kent, knocked out some solid jam tunes. Only to be eclipsed by Amanda Lou's sultry set. Then Johnny the Uke took the stage and got the house rockin' with his renditions of classic rock. Wally Gator and the Good Timers followed, and Wally was in rare form. I suspect this was because he'd never come this late on the order before.
Stuck on you, going on a pace with a long, long hair, squeeze you, trying to let a grizzly hair on. Yes, baby, oh yeah. I want to strip like glue, you know I'm stuck on you.
Ironically, Tony Scaroni closed out the night with his signature song, From the Beginning. It was about this time that my video camera decided to be cantankerous, sometimes working, sometimes not. Luckily, there are others among us that took video and pics to document what turned out to be a magical night of music and camaraderie. Way back in 1965, the Lovin' Spoonful came out with their song, Do You Believe in Magic? Here's a snippet of what they wrote. And it's magic if the music is groovy, it makes you feel happy like an old-time movie. I'll tell you about the magic and it'll free your soul. But it's like trying to tell a stranger about rock and roll. Well, I believe. And I have to say, that night in the Brat House was magic indeed. We sang, we danced, we hugged and laughed, and there was a sense of joy in the air that you could almost touch. I suspect that the cellist of Sarajevo would have approved. There are just some times in life that I wish I could bottle up and save for hard times to come. That would have been a big bottle from that night. Folks were a little slow moving the next morning, and for the most part, people tended to keep to themselves or huddle up in small groups. Round about noon, half of us went to lunch at the Tumbled Rock Brewery, which is out in the middle of nowhere. Some of the other half went hiking, some got high. Ray, in particular, indulged in one of his favorite pastimes. And the rest, I have no clue what they did. The final venue for Big People Bandcamp was a place creatively named the Keg and Patio. Why, you might ask? Well, on one half of the place they feature a huge replica of a beer keg. The other half is a large patio. Now, I don't know who came up with the name, but whoever it was, they're clearly ahead of their time in the Wisconsin Dells. Now, the manager of the Keg and Patio knew that we were coming, but apparently underestimated what it would be like to have 27 people all arrive at the same time on a Wednesday night. I'm not one to criticize, but the service was a little on the slow side and left a lot to be desired. And somehow they lost track of who was buying what, and at the end of the night there was a good-sized discrepancy between how much had been paid and how much was owed. After several minutes of back-and-forth negotiations, Randy asked how much we were short, and the manager said, around $70. Well, Randy said to hell with it and went ahead and paid up. That's Randy for you. There was a different vibe at the Keg and Patio that night. It's hard to pinpoint just why. Maybe people were still a tad tired from the magical night before at the Brat House Grill. Who knows why? It was just different. reckon I was the oldest by a couple of years. Thank you, Wally and Marshall. You can't measure the journey in time for memories or fears, and just follow those taillights and the cloud of dust, haunted by ghosts and the living on trust. Maybe it was due to the fact that there was hardly anybody in the place other than us. Or maybe it was like, to paraphrase Ben Franklin, musicians like fish begin to smell after 3 days. Who knows why? It was just different. Kathleen started us off with a couple of her guitar-based
To
songs.
start us off tonight, we have Kathleen on the guitar.
Ray, being a sensitive guy, followed her and, to his credit, acknowledged the vibe and said he wanted to set a mellow tone. Now don't get me wrong, there was still an amount of joking around and dancing and supporting one another, but it was all a bit muted.
Once a man rode you, switched from sail to steam.
7 years has gone so fast. Wake me up. And I finish. Shine a light on me.
Got me amazed, don't know what to do. My head's in the head, like it either way.
the street, hand me a pet cigarette, no strap shoes on my feet.
This boy. This boy.
And by 10:30 or so, we were packing up the gear and making our way back to the edge of the Dells. Almost everybody gathered around the fire pit one last time, trying our best to burn all the bundles of wood we'd purchased. Stories were told and a few more songs shared, but by midnight, I was having a hard time keeping my eyes open. Kathy started hugging people around the circle, and I timidly followed suit until I had said goodnight to everyone. Now, I am not by nature a hugging person. Not sure why, just never have been. But there's something about this cadre of people that pulls me out of my normal reservations. It's quite a community. Sure, people move in and out like the axiomatic ebb and flow of deep waters, but the contours of this ocean are unlike anything I've ever had in my adult life. I can honestly say that I have more friends today than at any other time I can think of. I guess it's something about love. When my camera was broken, but I didn't know it, I asked all the band campers about why they came on Rock and Ride. Their answers were pretty much the same. To be with friends, make music, have fun. My mentor, Don Jones, once said, "Oh heck, let me have you listen to him say it."
My desire and even belief is that beauty and poetry will help save the world. We've tried the generals, we've tried the politicians, we've tried the religions, but we haven't tried art enough. I believe in it.
So maybe that's it. Like the cellist of Sarajevo playing in the middle of a war, maybe music, maybe Rock and Ride 3 really is magic. The kind of magic that reminds us all to be kind to one another. To take every opportunity to say, "I love you," and have hope for the world that we live in.
For the love